right. Think we are going. Awesome. All right. So welcome everybody to this little talk on starting micro game studios. The whole purpose of this talk, can I make my face bigger? There we go. The whole purpose of this talk is to give you some perspective into founding indie game studios. I'm going to teach you a little bit about what I have learned after talking with a bunch of cool people and also founding for myself. And then we're going to have probably about 20 minutes to just do straight up Q&A. Good old Q&A is always useful. I'm going to go ahead and begin by sharing my screen here. And then we're going to talk. Is that right? Yes. We're going to talk about starting studios. Let's see. Is this working? Can people see my stream? We got thumbs up. Presentation still loading. I've been having this problem lately. That sucks. How do I fix this? Everybody says it's loading. That's not good. Let's try it a different way. Hold on here. Little live technical problem solving. Let's just do the whole window and see if that fixes things. Is that like better? Did that fix things? Can you click into it? Okay, cool. Still loading. Might cause audio issues. Don't see. Still loading. Damn it. Why has this been happening lately? 1 second here. It doesn't happen in our server. It seems to only happen in Work with Indies. Let's see. What else can I try? The screen is bigger now, but it still doesn't work. Here, what does Google say? Let me Google real quick. If we can't figure this out soon, we're going to go with an alternate option that won't be as good, but it'll be fine. We might try, why don't we actually try this? Let me open this up in a different browser. Maybe that'll fix it. Thank you everybody for being patient. We're going to get there, I promise. All right, let's see if this fixes anything. Stop streaming. How did the stream go? Terribly. Oh, that actually wouldn't fix anything though, I don't think. Now? Question mark? Do we see things? I can see it. Some people can see it, some people can't. But I could see it before. Seems like most people are getting loading. Can't. Crap. Yeah, it seems to only happen in Work with Indies, which is real weird. And then it seems to only happen for some people, which is also really weird. Okay, I'm going to try one more thing. I'm going to be right back. If it doesn't work, we're going to give up. And I'm just going to send you the link to the doc, and you're going to have to follow along, which sucks a little bit, but I'll be right back. Don't worry. All right, so LinkedIn, you're probably only seeing my face right now. Everything's okay, don't worry. We're going to get this working for you in just a second. Come on, Discord. Okay, I'm back. All right. Can people hear me? Hopefully. And then let's try sharing screen. Good. That's good. One problem solved. Does this fix? Yeah. Which is this? Yes. Okay. Is that any better? Do we see things? Are things being seen? Yay! Okay, sweet. All right. It took a hot second. Which, I'm actually not sure which stream. Okay, great. Yes, great. Okay. It only took us 10 minutes. Technology only works when IT wants it to, says Beth from LinkedIn. Beth, you're right. Let me get this streaming to LinkedIn. Goodness, so many issues all the time. All right. We're just going to share the entire LinkedIn screen. Okay. All right, we're ready to start. Thanks for being patient, everybody. That took a hot second, but we should now be good. So let's talk about founding indie game studios. Let me make this a little bit bigger for everybody. Maybe I can't make it bigger for everybody. Heyo. It's fine. We're just going to start. All right. So welcome, everybody. This talk is on starting your own micro game company. It is the time of it. Let me tell you about why. Many of you may have already experienced, I'm willing to bet, you may have already experienced the difficulties of applying to jobs in the game industry right now. Amir Satvat, who many of you probably know, if you don't already know them, follow him on LinkedIn. Somebody could drop the link in the chat right now. Good person to follow. If you aren't already following Amir, one of the things that he does for the community is he trawls data. He's a big data nerd, and he pulls out data for us about the hiring process. And one of the things he found out is that you only have about a 5% chance of landing a job in games in the next 12 months if you have never worked a job before and if you don't have a referral. So basically, if you're coming in cold, you only have about a 5% chance of landing a job in the next year. Super sucks. I feel you. And I'm so sorry that this is the case right now, but there is a hidden opportunity here. Part of the reason that we're having such a hard time landing jobs is because so many companies are pulling back. And the main reason that we're pulling back, I'll talk about it in a bit. But basically, we had a really good 2020, and we've kind of been like losing people ever since then. And that's all been compounding into a big mess. But as a result, companies are pulling back, which means fewer games are getting released by those big publishers and those big AAAs, which means it's the time of the indie. There are literally fewer games getting launched in the next 1 to 2 years, which means, hey, you can't get work and there's less big jobs out there, less big games out there, fewer big games out there. So just start your own games, start your own companies. I'm going to talk about sort of the realistic ways to do that and some of the realities of doing that right now. Before then, let me tell you a bit about who I am, in case you are unfamiliar with me. My name is Willem Delventhal. Oh, there we go. My name is Willem Delventhal. I am a longtime game designer from the industry, and I'm the founder of the Indie Game Academy, for those who might know that. I most recently was a game designer at Paradox Interactive, where I was working on a life sim game. But I've also got experience going back about a decade. And then I am a founder of an indie studio called the Delve Bros. We launched a tabletop RPG with like AR elements. It was very cool. And then I'm, of course, the founder of the Indie Game Academy, as well as a couple of other companies. So I've got some founding experience. Then I've also just worked for some big dogs. So I've got a little bit of the mix of the two worlds to help share some knowledge with you. Now, I have 3 core agreements that I ask for every time we jump into a class like this. Any of the classes that I run, there are 3 simple things I ask for, and they are as such. Number 1, let's keep this space as fun as we can. This is very much so. I mean, we're game developers. The main thing that we study, the main thing that we figure out how to do is make things fun. So let's keep our educational environments fun as well. Let's have a good time. Yes, indeed. You're a wizard, Harry. I always love watching the chat. Number 2, we ask that you celebrate as much as possible. This is not just because it's fun, although that is a good reason. It's also because you actually tend to remember those things that have high emotional impact on us. That's why you can still remember that embarrassing thing you did like a decade ago, but you can't remember what you had for dinner last night. What did I have? Something. Oh, yeah, I had pasta. And then number 3, let's please be as kind as we possibly can. Oh, that's weird. Didn't update on the slide up there. Are y'all seeing the be kind slide? Why am I getting so many issues from Discord right now? Nope. Why? Why do you do this? Let me try one more time. Now see be kind is good. Is IT fix again? Thank you. Jeebus. All right. And number 3, let's please be as kind as possible. Let's make this space positive. Let's be kind and patient with each other. We all have different kinds of experience. We all believe in different things. We're all at different levels of experience. So let's just be kind and patient with each other as much as we can. All right. So I would love to hear, before anything else, to kind of warm up the audience, what is your cozy game? I got to talk with Marie, the fairy job mother, if anybody knows her on LinkedIn, on the podcast that we run a couple of weeks ago. And she had this thesis that a cozy game is any game that feels cozy, meaning people who play like Counter-Strike like crazy and they play for hundreds of hours until it feels so comfortable makes Counter-Strike a cozy game to them. People have unique cozy games because the definition of a cozy game is not any specific genre. It is how it feels. So if it feels cozy, it's a cozy game. So I would love to hear what your cozy game is. Nasty Drac Slay the Spire, absolutely my cozy game. I have played hundreds of hours of that game. I love it. Baldur's Gate 3 is a great choice. Fishing loops and MMOs, interesting. Wingspan, digital version. Wingspan's a great game for those who like them some tabletop games or board games. Try it out. I'm loving seeing all of these. All right, let's actually talk. Stellaris is a great game too. Shout out to Paradox Interactive. It is now time for us to actually start about founding studios. So in order to get you all hyped up a little bit, I would love to see your favorite celebratory GIF and or emoji in the chat right now. Let's hype it up. Let's get into the actual good stuff. Yes, those look good. Yes, amazing. All right. So here is, first of all, my kind of call to action. This is me telling you, hey, you should start indie studios. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's also really hard. I'm going to talk about that too. But I'm going to give you at least the option. So in 2023, there were roughly 180,000 workers laid off in tech, and games falls under tech. Yeah, that sucks. Jobs are currently more scarce with more competition than literally ever before. I get to talk with a lot of smart people, and I talked with a game designer friend who's been in the industry for 30 years. And according to him, it's the worst it's been in 30 years. Sorry, I don't know. That's where we're at. Like I said, only about 5% of junior devs will land a job in the next 12 months. I don't tell you this to upset you or depress you. Hopefully, hopefully that is not what you're taking out of this. I actually tell you this to inspire you to action. Let me tell you why. So first of all, this graph right here is why everything sucks right now. In 2020, which you might guess what happened during 2020, the game industry made a lot of money. We had about 23% year-over-year growth. If you're unfamiliar with industry year-over-year growth, 4 to 5% is average. So we did 5 times better than average in 1 year. For every 4 people on the entire planet playing games, 1 more person started playing games in 2020 alone. That is crazy growth. I don't know if you understand. That is crazy growth. But as a result, you might see the tail end of this graph. Nobody could have possibly predicted that everybody would go back outside after 2020. So we had this huge boon. We hired a bunch of people. All of our expenses went up along with our revenue. And then the revenue dropped and the expenses were still up here. And basically, we've been laying off people ever since, which compounds upon itself because we wind up with this giant talent pool full of people who are great at their jobs, great at what they do, just like all of you in this room right now, and just not enough jobs to actually support them. So that's basically what we're dealing with right now. The silver lining of this situation, though, is that the big AAAs and the big publishers have a hard time taking risk. Indies, on the other hand, all of you lovely people, don't, because we weren't going to make money anyway. This time of instability literally also means, like I said earlier, fewer big budget games for the next 1 to 2 years. I had the chance to talk to another friend over at NetEase, and they are literally looking into investing into indies specifically right now, and they're not looking for big budget teams for this exact reason. For the next 1 to 2 years, there's going to be fewer big games out there, which means if you can release a solid game with a solid marketing campaign in the next 1 to 2 years, you've got a pretty good shot at making money. So despite there not being enough jobs, there is opportunity. It's actually one of the best times just for the next 1 to 2 years. AAAs can spin up a team really fast if they think there's an opportunity. But for the next 1 to 2 years, there actually is opportunity. It's just that it's in founding. It's not in landing jobs as much. That doesn't mean don't apply for jobs. You're about 200% more likely to succeed in founding a studio if you've already worked for somebody else. And working for people can be wonderful. It's just that there's not enough jobs. So the solution here is really just like founding studios. This instability is partly due to a profit-first mindset. Unfortunately, the place that we're in the industry is that the big dogs are totally cool with hiring a team for a game. Game gets done, they fire the team. That's sort of become the cycle of a lot of the big companies out there. And not everybody is doing it. Not every company is bad. Not all AAAs are bad. But it's definitely happening. We've all seen it happening. So by decentralizing the game industry a bit, I know that's kind of a buzzword, but basically by allowing more small-time developers to release games, we take back a little bit more control, and you individually take back a little bit of control, because now instead of being able to get laid off, it's just dependent on whether or not you can get sales for your game, which is still hard, but at least you're not going to get laid off. And if we are talking about just getting hired, if you're just looking for a job and you're like, I don't really want to found a studio, that sounds like a lot of work, it will theoretically recover another very smart person I love talking with is Christina Marie Drake, who is a ex-recruiter from Naughty Dog. And she seems to claim her best idea, her best guess, and remember this is a guess, is that hiring is going to get back to stable at least by about halfway through next year. So we're looking at like another year of stupidness, but hopefully it's about going to fix itself by then. So that means it's the age of the pint-sized indies, which is like why we're here right now, right? All right. So one of the things I have shared in the past is this little chart. Let me get the link to it. This is a flow chart of how to start an indie studio. So if anybody wants, here's the link, and I will drop it here as well. Yes, we love Christina Beth. So this is a flow chart of starting an indie studio, and it gives you some idea of some of the steps I'm going to be recommending here. This was put together, once again, my favorite way to learn is just learning from other people. So this is put together after talking with a lot of very smart people and founders, and is being slowly edited over time as we get more accurate data. So let's actually talk now about founding indie studios. Only about 30% of indie games on Steam specifically, because Steam has great data that you can easily look at, make over $10,000. And if you aren't familiar, over $10,000 is really still not enough to run a studio. Only about 7% of games generate enough revenue to fund a second project. David says, I bet Willem does voice acting. I wish I did. I wish. And if anybody needs voice acting, I got you. Hit me up. I would love to do that. So yeah, only about 7% of games make enough money to like justify releasing a second game. So founding indie studios still hard. But that said, the chances of getting employed were 5%. And I'm pretty sure if I do the numbers, the calculus, I think 7 is bigger than 5. Somebody can correct me on that, though. Do some math for me. Now, the other thing that's worth noting is whenever we do talk about breaking in, when we give talks about breaking in, there's these 3 things that we always recommend, which is building up a portfolio, networking like a maniac, and then applying as aggressively as you can. And so interestingly enough, even if that's the goal, founding a studio effectively answers one of those big 3. So even if you found a studio and it all falls apart, if you're one of the 93% that can't fund a second project, you still now have serious, like considerable experience on your portfolio from starting a studio and launching a game. This is one of the reasons that it really feels like the right time. If you're not going to be employed either way, then you might as well found a studio, launch something. You've got the 7% odds of actually having your dreams come true. And even if it doesn't, you have a really strong piece to put on your portfolio for hypothetically next year when everything's going to fix itself and everything will be better and wonderful. Now, the steps to starting an indie studio are as such. These are a very basic set of steps. We're going to talk through them. And I will warn you, every single studio does it a slightly different way. I'm actually going to give you 4 examples a little bit later in the talk so that you can get some perspective into how people have done it. So the first step is to learn the tech stack. If you aren't already familiar with the tools that are required for your profession, you're going to need those. You're going to need to learn the game engine. You're going to need to learn a little bit of game design. You're going to need to learn a little bit of marketing. Really get yourself acquainted with what is required of a founder and what is required of a game developer. After you've learned your tech stack, you can move on to team building. That's really like the first big step. You can totally solo dev, and some people do that successfully, but your chances are higher with somewhere between the sweet spot seems to be 2 to 4 founders, maybe as much as 5. A single founder statistically does worse than the sweet spot's actually really like the perfect ideal seems to be 3 to 4 founders. So finding that trusted co-founder team is a big part of what it takes to found a successful studio. Once you have found that team, doing legal and foundational homework is really important. I'm going to talk about what that looks like in a second. Then choosing a game project, then finding funding, and then building the game and hypothetically making your dreams come true, like I said. So step number 1, learn your tech stack. You've already done that, probably. I'm guessing that if you're in this call, even learning about starting studios, I probably don't need to tell you about learning your tech stack. I would guess that you've already done so. If you're feeling shaky, get to practicing. The best way to practice your tech stack is just to release games and to contribute to actual games. Above all else, if you aren't already familiar with this, in the game industry, we care about actually launched titles. So 1,000 unfinished projects, which we all have, I do too, is not worth a single released game. Yeah, I can totally share a link to the PowerPoint. Great idea. Let me, no, what? I don't, what? Okay, great. Thanks. 1 second. Let me share the link. Here you go. All right. And I'll drop that into the stream as well for anybody watching over on LinkedIn. Oh, I shared it twice. It's just so nice. All right. Awesome. So yeah, I probably don't need to talk about the tech stack. If you still need to learn your tech stack, there's tons of resources out there. You can come and join us on Discord. We've got a bunch of free classes and a couple of paid classes as well for those who want to get more advanced. But there's plenty of ways to learn the tech stack. First thing you got to do, though, is learn the skills. That should be self-evident. You need to know how to make games. The second thing you got to do is find trusted co-founders, and this can be a heck of a lot more tricky. Does everybody know what Y Combinator is? Do we have like some yeses in the comments? Y'all know what Y Combinator is? If you're unfamiliar, it is one of the biggest accelerators in the world. It is not specifically for games, which is why it's a little bit less well known in our community. But it's the accelerator. If somebody's talking about a tech accelerator, it's Y Combinator. And this guy, Kevin Hale, is one of the original founders. And he says he's got 3 questions he asks to decide if he even wants to consider a team. The first is, do I understand the idea? The second is if he's excited by it, which I think is interesting. He doesn't talk about viability or anything. He's just like, does that sound cool? And then the third is, do I like the team? So your team matters. Your team matters a lot. You can raise millions of dollars on a team alone. I'm not kidding. A company I started back in the day struggled to raise basically any money. And then a competitor that had no product and no proof got a couple people from Twitch's founding team to be on their team, and they raised $3 million. So having people who are cool and awesome and have some kind of validity behind them will help you raise money, and also just makes you, of course, more likely to succeed. A good team is one of your greatest assets. Interpersonal failure is actually the 3rd biggest killer of startups. Basically, co-founders get pissed at each other and then they stop running their studio. So finding the right people that you can stand working with. I had a mentor once tell me that a co-founder is like you're marrying somebody. And I can tell you, I've done it a couple times now. It's very true. You spend so much time with that person and you get into really intimate and sometimes really difficult conversations with that person and with those people. This is why you should seek co-founders you trust above all else. Skills important, culture's important. Everything else is, of course, important. But having people you trust and can get along with and like enjoy spending 8 hours a day with is going to be the number one thing you should be looking for. Team comp is also, of course, important. You don't want like 6 engineers and no artists, but you really want to try to find people that you can get along with above all else. Seek them the standard ways. There's, networking is networking. Go to events, attend classes, join game jam teams. And then the biggest thing is just when you keep them, find them. Think about it like a little treasure hunt. You're like, sick. I found this really cool audio person. Keep them. And what I mean by keep them is keep the relationship alive. Check in on them now and then. Do game jams with them now and then until you're ready to put that full team together. Now the sort of like Council of 9, meaning the 9 major disciplines, and this was actually established by Work With Indies. Hello, Work With Indies. Thank you for your work. Are these the sort of most important in my books to make a studio succeed is, number 1, you need an art and animation person. Indie games live and die by their visuals. That is what attracts people to play an indie. Think of your Super Hots or something like that. Number 2, you really need a product and business person. You need somebody to say, hey, we got to get this shit done. And you need somebody to be actually focused on how it can make money and how to monetize it. Number 3, this can maybe be the same person. Indies often wear multiple hats, but you really do need somebody who's focused on marketing the whole time. Discoverability is the number 1 killer of indie games. It's so hard to stand out. There are literally over 1 million games on the iOS store now. So getting somebody on your team who is entirely focused, they're not making the game, they're entirely focused on getting your game some attention is really important. And then, of course, having an engineer and a designer are both really important too. Now, all of these roles are important, but if you can only get a couple of people on your team, find somebody who's businessy, producty, find somebody who makes good art, find somebody who can program, and find somebody who can design. Now, once you find your team, the first thing I want you to do with them, and this is actually a good way to test a team too, if you're like not quite certain they're the right people, is just to do some game jams together. Game jams are so phenomenally valuable. They let you prototype games. They let you start to build an audience right at the beginning. The minute you decide you want to start a company, build a Discord and start putting people in there who are interested in your games. And you can do that through game jams. And besides that, they also are just a place for you to test each other. So you know the weaknesses of this team, you know the kind of talent you might be missing. You also know like what sets Joe off. Oh man, anytime I question Joe's design in this way, he gets real mad. So I won't question it that way anymore. That way you sort of have like a low stakes way to learn how best to function with your team. I'm curious for those in the comments, if you already have trusted co-founders. If you're thinking about starting a studio or you have already started one, I would love to hear if you already have trusted co-founders and then which disciplines you think you are missing. And part of the reason I ask that is because there's 129 very smart people in this room, like right now. And you could totally DM one of them and be like, hey, I saw that you needed an artist. I make good art. Just telling you could do. All right. I married him and his wife. Tragic. All right, let's talk about legal and foundational setup now. So when you do have your team put together, what I want you to do is to start with why. This is from a really old TED Talk that's still a very good one by a dude named Simon Sinek. It is a major task of any business to create culture. Basically, the reason that we exist. Oftentimes, the reason that we exist is not to make money. Money important. Can't live without money. But it does not motivate people for the most part. It's a pretty low motivator compared to a bunch of other things, and higher purpose and culture is one of the big ones. So culture leads to consistent employees, consistent games. Your game, you can like feel a team's culture through the game, and it leads to a consistent market as well. A certain type of user likes to buy products, in this case games, from people with, you know, their kind of culture. So one of my favorite examples that many of you may already know about is John Romero and John Carmack making Doom literally in a dim like cave. They had a little office that they like blacked out, and then they put up all kinds of satanic art and they blasted heavy metal music the whole time they were making Doom. That is team culture. That's the kind of person you can trust and build a game with. Now, establishing shared vision here is one of the best things you can do for yourself when you first get started. So once you've got that team, once you've decided on your why do we exist, move on to decide what your actual vision is. Your mission and vision statements are a great place to start. I won't dive into them too deep here, but basically that just means what are we trying to get done in the world? And then what are we trying to get done as a team? What is our dream for this team, for this studio, this startup? It ensures consistent product, and it helps attract the right people. And this is both your team, your users, and potentially investors, publishers. When publishers like what you stand for, they may well back you up. My biggest piece of evidence for this is the man, the myth, the legend, Sven Vink, who is the general manager over at Larian Studios, the creators of Baldur's Gate 3. And if you didn't see, during the Game Awards, Sven got up on stage in a full friggin' suit of armor. I had the chance to speak with him at GDC this year, which was like, I fanboyed so hard. I was like, oh my God. I like froze in place. And one of the things that I asked him about was exactly this. Basically, how do you keep culture alive, and how do you make decisions between team members? And he gave me this really awesome answer where he basically said, I don't care who comes up with an idea. I just care if it sounds fun. So that's a perfect example of the culture at Baldur's Gate 3. It doesn't matter where the idea comes from. It doesn't really matter what the idea even is. It just matters if it sounds fun. A beautiful example of team culture. And we can feel that in the end product. We can feel that in Baldur's Gate 3. Now, a quick word about legal risk. Ooh, everybody's favorite slide. I know you all were looking forward to this one. It's really important to find a lawyer and an accountant and talk with them like right away. Know your business entities. Remember that I am not a lawyer. I'm just giving you some experience from what I have run into myself. But very much so, probably what you're going to start out with is an LLC, a limited liability company. But there are other business entities out there, and the best person to ask about that is your lawyer. Make sure you do your taxes. The nice thing about an LLC is the taxes are pretty easy. It is basically the same thing as just doing personal taxes. And the biggest thing I want to impart on this slide is that it is way less scary and way less work to get both of these things in order than you think it is. You can have an LLC within like 3 hours. I'm not exaggerating. You go online and you do a little beepity boopity, and you have an LLC, you have a company, a business, and they'll send you all the docs, and you'll feel very good and special about yourself. And it's also cheaper than you think a lot of the time. I spent on the Indie Game Academy only $300 to do our taxes this year. I was terrified that it was going to be so much, and it was $300. $300 is still potentially unapproachable for some people, but it's really just less scary and less work than you think. So I just want you to go and find yourself a lawyer and an accountant. It'll make you feel more official, and it'll help you avoid so many problems so quickly. All right. I would love to hear in the comments now, another question for the audience. Why do you want to start a studio? I'm going to take a little sip. This is being recorded. It's being streamed to LinkedIn, and it auto records there. Why do you want to start a studio? Tell me. Melanite says to be my own boss. It's cliche, but you're right. I'm tired of getting laid off, Melanite. I think you are too. Very much so. Yes, to be my own boss. Money tastes good. If you want money, founding a studio is not your best bet. It takes a long time. But if you keep at it, it is one of the most rewarding things I have ever done in my life. Need work. I want to make a game for like forever. You can make a game right now. Do it. Not hard. I mean, a little hard, but like approachable. You can do it. I want to have autonomy and be able to not rely on getting hired. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that we're all feeling right now. The game industry is like freaking rough. I didn't say this earlier. Some of you may have already seen this. I got laid off like a month ago. And the project that I've been working on for a year, that some of my team members have been working on for 4 years, that already got greenlit, got canceled 2 weeks before launch. We're all feeling it. We've all got this like mutual PTSD. The game industry is bonkers right now. So let's all, hug each other and support each other. And this is a big part of the reason that we are being proponents of this, that we're recommending, hey, it's just kind of time to start your own studio. That's actually more realistic than getting hired right this second. All right, let us continue. I love hearing why people want to start studios. That's beautiful. One of the reasons to ask this question is because you can see in the chat so many of the people who are saying similar things to what you're feeling, right? So look for those and feel a little sense of camaraderie and get excited about doing it for yourself. So once you have your team and once you've done a little bit of legal setup, you've talked to a lawyer and said, hey, the 5 of us want to start a studio. It's time to actually choose what the heck you work on. Now, I'm going to do this kind of in 2 parts. The first thing I'm going to do here is talk about picking a game as if you were just going to launch an IP, which means you're going to build a brand new game and that's how you're going to try to make money. I want to warn you, though, that that is actually not the only option. And in fact, it's one of the least likely to succeed options. So I'm going to show you a couple of founders and how they did it as alternatives to just making revenue. All right. So when you're picking a project, one of the biggest things I believe in is what's called concept funneling, which basically means you don't pick the first cool game that comes to mind. You instead go through an actual vetting process. You say, all right, what holes are there in the market? What could actually make money? What is currently making money right now? You do your research, you do your homework, and you go through an actual vetting process. An amateur, I see this very often. People just pick kind of the first cool game, and that can work, and that's why it's so tempting, but it works so infrequently. It's like less than 1% of games that, somebody just built for funsies and it happened to work. Most games are very reliable, steady hits. They're not home runs. A game dev goddess or anything in between chooses a game based upon agreed upon objectives. Here's what we're trying to hit, as well as an established vetting process. This is a hole in the market we think we've identified. This is a new type of genre that's really hot right now. Whatever the heck it is, whatever makes you think this is the perfect idea. To give you some perspective and how to pick that perfect idea, this is the concept validation funnel, which is a model that we give to our students at the Indie Game Academy. And it's a really simple 5-step process to try to give you the best possible game concept you can make. Because games are art, there are infinite possible games we could make at any given time, right? There's an infinite number of possibilities out there. That's our big infinite, our true infinite. In order to pick the best possible game to go down the concept validation funnel, the first thing I want you to do is to outline your constraints and your objectives. What target market are you trying to hit? What genre are you trying to build? Do you have an animator on your team? If you don't, that's a pretty big constraint. Set those, and basically you'll be defining your little infinite, your box to ideate inside of. Once you've done that, you're going to ideate. You're going to come up with 20 to 50 awesome ideas. Once you've done that, you're going to filter, which basically means eliminate the weakest ones. There's a bunch of ways to do this: surveying, testing game concepts with real people, just getting people's feedback. And then just your gut checks is pretty good too. If you're like, yeah, that just seems kind of like a crappy idea, you can eliminate them. So filter down your 20 to 50 ideas down to like a 5 to 10. From those 5 to 10, I want you to pick 2 to 3 that seem super awesome and invest the time to make a prototype. Then test that prototype with real human beings, see what they say, and only pick one of those if it seems like a home run. Games are boom and bust. We don't have enough time to make a game that seems pretty good. You should only be working on a game if it seems incredible. So if you prototype a couple games and you're like, then I want you to go back up into the funnel, ideate more, and come back down until you hit that home run, and then pick that game and build that one out. Now, to give you some perspective into how other founders have done this, I've collected a group of 4 very smart people that I've had the privilege to chat with in the past to give you some perspective into how they did it. So this is Renee Gittins, the founder of Stumbling Cat, which is now a 10-year-old game studio. So the main way that Renee managed to release Potions: A Curious Tale is what I seem to find to be the most common way, which is basically Renee did it on the side and worked other jobs. Renee did contract work as well as full-time employment to financially support herself. And the entire time she was doing that for 10 years, she was working on Potions: A Curious Tale before finally launching it just this past year, actually. And it's doing pretty well for itself. So good on you, Renee. The next example I will show is George Cochran. George is the founder of Juggernaut Games, which is a 13-year-old game studio. And the main way that they financially supported themselves, which is super interesting, is Unity Asset Store assets. They made Unity Asset Store assets as well as PlayStation Store assets. So basically, they would make little asset packs for other game developers to use. And that was the main way that they generated an income. Now, the PlayStation Asset Store is no longer around, and it was invite only. So they managed to basically prove themselves as as viable to build stuff for PlayStation and managed to win a contract to release stuff on the PlayStation Store. And then that kept them afloat for years. And then they pretty recently released their second IP, which is Starcrawler's Chimera. So yeah, asset stores. Who would have thought? The third one is a personal mentor. I love this dude. This is Charlene Chaudin. I worked with him at Lumosity for 4 years, and he's actually one of the people who taught me how to code in the first place. He is the founder of Masala Games, which is now a 12-year-old game studio. And he financially supported himself via contracting and consulting work. So his company, before anything else, before ever creating an IP, was just a good, solid contracting firm. Their professional niche, which is important if you're trying to be a contracting firm, was solving engineering problems that nobody else can. So basically, they were specifically looking for people who were having super difficult tech problems. And then he is a very smart guy, and a bunch of people on his team are very smart people. And so they would just figure out a really difficult problem for people. And that was how they sold themselves. That was enough for him and a team of 12 people to financially support themselves out of India for 12 years. And they're now just releasing their first IP, Detective Dotson, which is doing actually incredibly well for itself. He's popping off all over the news. It's very cool to watch. And the last one is maybe the most interesting. I am fascinated by this guy. This is Joe Kasava, founder of Puzzles by Joe, a 14-year-old game studio. He's the only one on this list, and a unicorn as far as it goes, to financially support himself this long, 14 years, not only both as a solo developer, that is so rare, guys, but also only through revenue. He did not work any other jobs. The only money that has ever come in is the money he made from his games. And this game right here is his game. Think you could make that? I think you could make that. And I'm not bad-mouthing Joe. His games are great. He makes the Clutter franchise. He's now released the 17th Clutter game. You want to know how he made it work? He made his own IP. He made his own franchise. He just released game after game after game, changed it up a little bit, provided fresh features, fresh interesting mechanics for the audience that already existed. I'm sure that audience started tiny, by the way. I bet the first game he released, I don't know this, but I bet the first game he released didn't do that well. But if you have even a tiny audience, you release game number 2, you get a little bit bigger of an audience. Let me close my door 1 second. All right. So that's a super interesting one and maybe something for y'all to consider. Okay. So I would love to hear now, what is a project that you're itching to build? And the bonus is it viable? Part of the reason that I show you these 4 people is to help you understand that a ton of indie developers are not making money from their actual games. A ton of indie developers, and in my opinion, perhaps more common than indie developer. I don't even say more common, almost definitely more common than indie devs who are making enough money from their games are indie devs that create some kind of contracting firm or find a different way to financially support themselves while they build out the game. It's less fun. It's less of like the dream. But look at all these people who have game companies that are older than 10 years. So when you're picking that project, maybe the project is not yours. Maybe you start with somebody else's. Maybe you start by getting paid a little bit to build something for somebody who's just really excited or for a big brand out there. I would love to hear it in the comments. Like I said, what are some projects that you are just itching to build? Contracts for museums and other spaces in addition to original IP. That is so cool, Subliminal Man. If you do start some kind of contracting firm or you do contract work for other people, the biggest piece of advice I can give there is to find an actual niche. If you're just another contracting firm, it'll be just about as hard to find work as it is to find a job in games. If instead you do something specific, like Shaolin solving the hardest technical problems out there, or I have another friend who runs Secret Item Games. They do localization specifically to Germany. If you have a little professional niche, it makes you much more likely, much more realistic for you to find work. All right, so you've chosen a project. It's time to find funding. If you did contract work, you did it. You already found funding. If you didn't do contract work, if you are releasing your own IP, then it's time to try to find some money for it. This is Luther Potengi. Luther is another good friend. He currently works over at Warner Bros. Games, and he's also the founder of his own studio that released a game that I'm forgetting the name of. Oh, Joy Manufacturing Co. is his studio, and he built and released a pretty successful like dating sim / narrative game that was really cool. I am shamelessly stealing his slides because they're very good. Sorry, Luther. All right, so finding money in games, pretty hard. I think that's the theme for this whole talk. But there are 3 main methods to do so. Number 1 is crowdfunding. Number 2 is investors. Number 3 is publishers. All of these require kind of different approaches. Let's talk about those different approaches. The first one is crowdfunding, and this is where a lot of self-published people really like to go. Yeah, what are you good at? That's your niche. I love that, Laureatus. Thank you. Kickstarter and other crowdfunding sources like Indiegogo are sources that people really love to go to. That's personally how I founded the board game that I was talking about earlier. It is likely your best choice, especially as an indie dev, because frankly, it's still pretty hard to find publishers and investors at this time. Just like the games are drying up, the jobs are drying up, so is the funding. And once again, it should all return. We will balance out eventually, but at least right now we're in the middle of the drought. We're actually towards the tail end of the drought, if that makes you feel better. This is likely the best choice as a result. So the way that you do Kickstarter right is you already have your game basically done, and you already have a community that wants the game. Kickstarter and crowdfunding at this point in time are kind of effectively just storefronts where people are willing to pay you a little bit early. So make sure. What makes me feel this is the end, I just have smart people who have told me it's supposed to get better next year, but we're all guessing, so who knows? It will balance out eventually, though. That is just how economics work. All right, so yeah, you already need to have a full game. For the most part, 80 to 90% of your game needs to be done, playable. It needs to look good. It needs to basically be ready to go. You can't be halfway there. That doesn't work anymore. You need to also already have the majority of the audience that's going to back you lined up. So the stat that's important there is about when you go to Kickstarter, about 70% of your backers will be people that you brought there. So your email list, your Twitter, whoever the heck it is. Only about 30% of your backers are going to come from Kickstarter or another source. So it's really important that you basically are already ready to go. Kickstarter just gets you that extra 30%. It's also a great marketing tool, and it can pop off and have like a viral event. It's just you shouldn't count on that. The cons are you have to actually make a campaign, which is like so much work. It took us like 8 months to put ours together. And it's kind of all or nothing. A lot of them do fail. And you can likely only ask for tens of thousands of dollars. So when we did our board game, we made about 30,000. which we're very proud of. It allowed us to ship our game, but none of us really got paid. The next option is investors. These are generally people who are looking for bigger sums of money. So if you're looking to start a studio that's going to take like 20 to 50 people and it's going to cost you millions of dollars, the investors are often the way to go. Investors paying the company money will pay the company money and get some amount of ownership of the company and or the game. So they will actually own a chunk of your company forever, or at least until you buy them out. The pros are it's instant money and it's often a lot of money. It can be millions of dollars. It's also expertise. These people are people who are very good at getting games to make money. So it's great to have them in the door. The best investors are kind of like your advisors. The cons are they're there kind of forever. You've essentially just hired your own boss. You get less control and you own less of the game itself. That said, owning 70% of a game that makes $1 million is a lot better than owning 100% of a game that makes $5, right? All right. And the third one is publishers. Publishers are kind of quasi-investors, but they generally provide services more than money, although they do often provide money these days. The biggest thing they provide is PR, marketing, social media help. Basically, they already have their audience, and they're just kind of like surrogating their audience onto your game. The pros are there's a lot of little details that you won't know about launching games until you've done it 5 or 10 times that they do because they've done it with a bunch of games. The cons are they still don't know your game as well as you do, and they still act kind of like your boss. They're going to make decisions for you. They have the power to just pull your game if they don't like it, and they're always after recouping. They're always after making their money back. The last option that Luther put in here, which I think is funny, is personal debt. He also mentions banks and grants. Just don't do it. Just don't put yourself into debt. I actually did that with my first startup, and I shit you not, I'm not exaggerating. I only finished paying that off like 2 months ago. That was like, I don't know how long ago that was. That was like 7 or 8 years ago. I wasn't like deep, like drowning in debt, but I had debt from that experience, from that attempt, the very first attempt, for 8 years. It's just not worth it. Don't do it. That said, grants, if you can find them, are wonderful. And things like Epic Grants or something like that, heck yeah. If you can find them and apply for them and land them, abso-freaking-lutely go and get them. There's also platform deals, which are kind of interesting. So different platforms will sometimes pay you to release games like on their service or with a new piece of hardware or something. My own brother released a game for Bose, the audio people, when they had like an AR headset that was only audio, which I always thought was a really weird idea. But they needed games on that platform. And so he released a game and they paid him a couple $1,000s to make a game there. So these are kind of hard to find because you kind of got to be in the know. But if you can find them, they're a great deal as well. All right, so you got a bunch of options now, a bunch of thoughts on potentially how to find money for your game. In my opinion, though, what I see time and time again, the most common and realistic way that people make money on the side, that people make enough money to release a game, is that they build the game on the side. They have another job that is not games related, usually, that is sustaining them and keeping them alive, even if it's not glamorous, even if it's not making a bunch of money, but it's enough for them to live and eat. And then they're building games whenever the heck they can. So this is not glamorous, but you know what? If this is what it takes, get it done, right? All right. All right, last step, build game. Here's the secret. You already know how to do that. I shouldn't have to tell you that. You know how to do that. Building games is like the best part. You know how to build games. I got to tell you about that. All right, great. Now that you know. So here are your steps one more time to remind you. Number 1 is learn how to build a game if you don't already know. Number 2 is to put together that team, find those trusted co-founders, anywhere between 2 and 5 people. You can, by the way, have founders and then team members. Those can very much be separate groups, and that is okay, and that's actually pretty common. Once you push past 5 founders, things start to get real messy. I would not recommend it. Do your legal and foundational homework, get some contracts signed, definitely sign contracts before you ever start building something that you intend to make money from. It can get so messy if you make any kind of real money. Choose that project, and that project might be for somebody else. It might be a contract job. Find funding, question mark, so many question marks there, and then build the game. So my final word, the biggest And most important piece of advice, there are definitely grants in the UK. You just got to Google them and find them. My biggest piece of most importantest advice of the whole universe is you can do it. Really. Here's a true fact. The highest predictor, the most accurate predictor of startup success is... Actually, can anyone guess? What is the number one predictor of startup success? I'll take a sip while you guess. Papa J says starting, passion, wish lists, doing it, failures, persistence. The number one predictor, highest correlation of of this stat to startup success is time spent in the marketplace. So Artyom, yeah, perseverance is like actually the answer. Yes, just like keep doing it. First year, probably won't make money. Second year, probably won't make money. Third year, probably won't make money. But maybe on the fourth year, maybe on the fifth year. And if you can keep at it, you know, it can be quite difficult. It can be a little depressing sometimes. But I'll tell you what, this is the Indie Game Academy is now the fourth company that I have started. I will never stop doing this. It is so satisfying. It is so wonderful. It is so invigorating. And it is like learning. I said this in a LinkedIn post earlier. It is like learning from a freaking fire hose. You crank the tap and you just you learn so much so fast. I absolutely love it. So the number one predictor is just time in the market. You can do it. It won't be easy, but you absolutely can. The best adventures are not easy. Frodo didn't have a fun time, but he sure did save Middle Earth, didn't he? All right. We're now at the Q&A session. It's a little bit late. Sometimes I like to rant. And then also we had that like 10 minutes of tech debt. I'll stay at least a couple minutes late for anybody who has Q&A. So go ahead, just drop questions in the chat. I will call them out and try to answer them for you. All right. Let's see. Yes. Nice. Okay. So Noah Talk says, you mentioned that we should get both a lawyer and an accountant before starting an LLC, but also that we should have an LLC set up in 3 hours. How does that work exactly? All right. So that's a great point. The biggest moment that you need a lawyer and an accountant is once the team starts getting involved. You can totally found your own LLC right this second in about 3 hours. That said, it's not necessarily worth it until you're ready to start, because you are going to have to pay a couple of bucks. If you do it entirely yourself, which you mostly can, like it's really not that hard. It'll cost you anywhere between like 50 and 150 bucks. If you use an online service to do it, which there are many, I often use LegalZoom. It might cost you like 200 bucks. And if you got a lawyer to do it, it's going to be like 300 to 400 bucks. But still, that's not that much money. Yeah, so to answer your question, Noah Talk, starting of the LLC, I think, should happen when you are like ready to begin. And that can happen before or after finding teams. I would suggest, I guess, that you have your founding team ready. So if you're founding your own company and then populating it with team members that aren't founders, then I would just start the LLC on your own. Go ahead. If you have a founding team, people that you will call co-founders and will get partial ownership of the company, you should wait to start the LLC until you have them in the room. And that's really when you want a lawyer. You can still do it on your own, mostly without any danger. But the biggest like risk really is if somebody like disappears, they own that percent of your company, period. So having paperwork that clearly defines what happens if somebody disappears or what happens when money gets made is really important. And a lawyer is really the person to do that, kind of, period. So that was a long way for me to answer. But basically, when you have your founding team ready to go, that's when you should start an LLC. And you should also do foundational documentation, which a lawyer will tell you about. And those are mostly contracts to say, here's how ownership works. Here's what percentage of the company people own. Here's what happens if somebody disappears, all that good stuff. That can be like a little scary sometimes, but it's really not actually that scary. It really is okay. And there are so many lawyers out there who are super cool and will know that you don't have that much money and will not charge you that much. All right. Justin says, what are some good ways to find contract work? So time and time again, I love interviewing people, learning from them. Time and time again, I ask the contractors this question because I'm curious about it too. And they say the same thing. I ran into some dude and I was like, I can make this. And they were like, cool, I'll pay you. That's how you find contract work. Basically, you network. There are definitely other ways to do so. platforms like Upwork or Fiverr can work, although oftentimes you wind up getting paid less than you really should on those platforms. You can sort of self-advertise yourself on platforms like LinkedIn or any social platform and say, hey, we're a contracting firm. This is the kind of thing we work on if you need help with this. The other thing that you're going to want to do is basically cold calling. Cold calling, the old definition of that is going literally door to door and knocking on the door. In the digital age, this just means essentially soliciting people. Don't be salesy and annoying. But you can go into a Discord server and say like, hey guys, this is what I do if anybody needs this. Or you can go to a Facebook group and do the same thing. Or if you see somebody asking about exactly what you do, you can DM them, but like, it's starting to get weird. But a little bit of just like that active pursuit of clients is really what's going to actually find you clients. All right. What type of lawyer to ask? Contract lawyers. That's it. Contract lawyers and business lawyers. Believe in the heart of the cards. Yes, Mr. Boudier. Believe. Daniel, I can't give you portfolio feedback. That's not what this call is about, but we have done portfolio reviews in the past, and I'm sure we'll do more. So come and hang out with us at the next one. What would you recommend for networking and marketing for teams who might not have a large budget? So I'm not quite sure what you mean by this one, M, but I assume for networking and marketing for teams who might not have a large budget. So networking is free, mostly. Events like GDC cost money for sure, but there's tons. There's so many free or near free events out there. One of my favorite websites is this one. Super approachable and easy. There's online events here. Why is it not posting? Oh, because I'm not hitting the right key. That's Game Conf Guide. You can check that out. Wait, what the hell? I didn't copy the right thing. Hold on. Let me try that again. There. All right, cool. GameConfGuide.com. So you can find networking events basically anywhere in the world pretty quickly. The IGDA chapters site is another really good resource. IGDA is like a godsend, actually. It's an incredible resource that we didn't have when we were getting started in games, so use it. There's IGDA chapters all over the world, and if you don't have one near you, you can start one yourself pretty easily, and that will cause people to flock to you. So things like that are a great place to go. For marketing on a budget, that is hard, and there's so many people out there that'll give you so many different thoughts on how to do that. But really, the biggest thing is think of that like guerrilla marketing mindset. How do you get eyeballs on this game? Actually, one of my favorites. So you're probably the answer is organic marketing via social media. Actually, the Baldur's Gate 3 TikTok is a great example. If anybody saw that, or Aggro Crab is one of my favorites to point people to. What the hell is it? YouTube Shorts. Yeah, here we go. So these are the guys who released Another Crab's Treasure, which is a crab-like Dark Souls, which is hysterical. But yeah, so that's a great way for you to learn. So organic marketing is really the answer to that question. Basically putting out great content that people will like, independent of your game. All right. I've lost my place, so I'm just going to start answering random questions as I see them. For funding, would it be easier to attempt to open, say, an asset shop and sell game assets to help avoid personal debt? So there's no right way, and it will be different for different people. Depending on your team comp, it might be way more realistic for you to make asset packs than another studio. Or maybe asset packs will be really crap for you and not really work out, or you might not quite figure out how to do it, or maybe your art style isn't one that people tend to purchase really often, or whatever the heck. So the answer to your question for funding, would it be easier to do X, Y, or Z? The answer is you just have to experiment. As game developers, one of our main tools is iteration, and that same tool applies to business founding. Iterate on your business itself. How do we make money? Let's try this. That didn't quite work. Let's try that. That didn't quite work. Let's try this. Oh, that's starting to make a little bit of money. Let's double down on this and see if we can make more from it. So really the answer is just try it. And if you start to see some success, see if you can grow that success. And if it just feels like it's too much effort for too little reward for too long, which is an impossible thing to quite know, then try something else. All right. Would you be able to do a talk on creating an LLC? I can. I'm probably honestly not the right person to do that. We have brought in lawyers for our students in the past. So I will write this down as an idea, and maybe we can snag a lawyer to come do like a community lecture. I make no promises, but we'll try. Lawyers are not cheap. So yeah, can't do that too often, but maybe we can set at least one up. All right. They're cheaper than you think, though. And especially if you're like a little indie, they're often very nice and will give you some advice for free and maybe point you in the right direction. Time management tips for working on a normal job while also pursuing this. Such a good question. I have had a side hobby or just a straight up business running on the side during my entire professional career. From the moment I was working in any kind of work environment, I've had something going on the side. It is not always easy to find a work-life balance, but it is very much possible. Okay. Neon Orange Knight, who is Sam Castry, who is a lawyer, just DM'd me because he is in this room and said, I'll do the talk. So first of all, feel free to DM Neon Orange Knight in the chat. He's a cool guy. But also, maybe we'll work that out with him. All right. So time management, definitely hard. The best thing I can recommend is same deal, iterate. You're going to think you know how to make it work, and then it just won't work for you. You'll be really tired and not really yourself. So it'll take you some time to kind of find a good balance. But a couple of thoughts. Number one is calendar stuff out, actually schedule your time. So here's the 3 hours that I'm working on my game. Here's the hours that I work on my main job, and block yourself a number of hours per week on your game that feels realistic. Just like 5 hours a week is enough to make meaningful progress. What I used to do when I very first got started, this is when I was young and crazy, is I used to wake up at 6 a.m. and do 2 hours on my game every morning before I got on the bus to work. And I would do that every weekday. And then on Saturdays, I would work for almost a full shift. I would do 6 to 8 hours on my game as well. So that was when I was like, I had no life besides my side projects. And it's not really what I recommend because work-life balance is important. But the biggest tip is just to actually schedule things out and then iterate on it, adjust it until it feels realistic and isn't making you miserable. Work-life balance is important. You can burn the candle at both ends, but you can only do that for so long. So, just make sure you're taking care of yourself. That's very important. All right. What are the questions we got here? I'll probably do let's go to 7:10 since it took us 10 minutes to do tech setup. So I'll do 2 more here. Any tips on building your social audience, says Haley. Great question. I feel like you should be the one answering that question, Haley. Follow Haley Rojas on LinkedIn. Haley, feel free to drop your LinkedIn. She does an incredible job at building her social audience. Building a social audience is a great way to have an audience for your game. There's a couple of things that fundamentally work for building a social audience. The first and the biggest one, and this is the one that none of you want to hear, is consistency. Woo! Doing it every single day, or at least on a set schedule forever. Being consistent helps your audience know what to expect. They know when to come and find your content, and also it just keeps it alive. The algorithm of basically every social platform out there prefers consistent content. So if you leave for a week, you will literally get less engagement on your posts. So just keeping it going, being consistent, and doing that regularly, and appreciating the small wins. I have tried to build so many different social platforms, and I used to be really upset when I wasn't getting thousands of followers, but that's so dumb. Having even 20 people follow you is great. That's 20 people who might buy your game. Having 100 people, having 200 people is all good. So celebrate every individual follower. And then besides being consistent, figure out your voice and your niche again, basically. Like, what is it that your audience really likes and appreciates from you? And then when you do find that, double down on that as much as possible. You can definitely have 2 or 3 kind of different categories of things that you talk about. But if you're posting extremely different content, it kind of confuses your audience. You're essentially targeting different types of people. So when you figure out what your audience wants, stick with that for the most part. And then, just make good content and make authentic content. That's really hard to do sometimes. But people can tell when something is authentic versus forced because you feel like you have to do it. Cool. All right. And just have fun with it. we're game developers. We appreciate people who just enjoy themselves. Let's see. I'll do one or two more. What else we got? I'm seeing lots of great conversation too. Do we have any questions on the stream? Beth M says marketing on a budget equals organic grind. Yep. All right. Not seeing too many other questions. Let's see. All right. If there's any other questions, oh, there's one. How important is LinkedIn in terms of building an audience? I'm more of a Twitter person. That's a super good question. And I actually maybe should have mentioned that in the last answer. In general, for all of you right now, I want you to pick one social network and then go super hard on that. Don't bother trying to do them all because it's just not realistic. And also because you probably don't know them all. Different platforms like different things. So I finally have found my social network in LinkedIn. I really love LinkedIn. I really like creating posts for it because it's the kind of content I want to be involved in. I want to be pushing the professional realm of games. That's what I care about. If I was instead just posting about like, I don't know, what would be inappropriate for LinkedIn? If I was only posting about how obsessed I am with Warhammer 40K, I guess that might work on LinkedIn. We're game developers. We're all dorks, but probably it would work worse than like Instagram. So pick one social network that you already know well, that you use on a frequent basis, and go super hard on just that one platform. As your game expands, as your team expands, you can consider going to multiple platforms. Indie Game Academy has been just LinkedIn for its entire life, 4 years. And now we're finally branching out because we have wonderful people like Haley to help support us. But for the longest time, when it was just me or just two other people, Jess and Ulysses, we just did one. We just did LinkedIn. So pick just the one. If it's not LinkedIn, that's okay. The side benefit, though, of LinkedIn is that it totally does help you find work because it helps get you a little bit of reputation in games and a little bit of credibility. So that is a side benefit of going with LinkedIn. All right. Follow on Twitter, please, says Haley. Oh, Haley. I think, do we have any last questions? I can maybe do one more. I'll do one more if anything pops up. Before then, I've had such a lovely time. I freaking love coming in and talking to Work with Indies. I'm going to send a couple of links for anybody who's interested in hanging out. The first one is our LinkedIn at the Indie Game, excuse me, not our LinkedIn, our Discord at the Indie Game Academy. It's a really wonderful place to find support and other people to work with. So if you're looking to just find a community of really goofy, kind, supportive, patient wizards making games, come and join us at the Indie Game Academy Discord server. There's also, we host tons of free events just like this there. So for instance, right now, if you go to the Indie Game Academy server and you look at the events in the top, there's one next Wednesday with Luke Piazza, who is a game designer in industry, and he's talking about nailing the design interview. So he's going to be talking about how to interview as a game designer. And that's a totally free event happening at this coming Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah, come and join us. Talk about interviewing in design. And we do a bunch of those. So we'd love to see it in the Discord. And then if you want to get more in depth, we do have a paid class coming up, but it's pretty cheap. It's $50. Let me share the link. This is our level 1 bootcamp. It is 8 total hours of live classes on Saturday and Sunday, August 17th and 18th, where you will learn from 7 professors in just 1 weekend. You'll build your first game in Unity. This time around, we're building a 2D platformer game. And the biggest thing is we're going to introduce you to the game industry and how game development actually functions. So if you've been hungry to kind of get introduced to the game industry, it's a great place to start. And actually, Haley's yelling at me to mention the scholarships. If you type in this code, don't tell anybody, IGA50, you'll get 50% off. And that's because we're trying to make it accessible. In general, IGA level 1 doesn't make us much money, but we do have to pay the smart people that we bring in because we believe in that. How do we get a scholarship? Well, I just gave you 50% off for that one. I think Haley is probably talking about level 2. I wasn't really planning to mention that, but sure, I can mention it. Level 2 is our tech stack deep dive. You'll spend 5 weeks building a Spyro clone, Spyro the Dragon, in Unity this time, although we are slowly building one in Unreal. So the whole idea is you get hyper acquainted with Unity as well as Git, as well as ticketing software. And that is a little bit more pricey, but there are scholarships that bring it down to as low as $200 for 5 weeks of live classes with Rick Williams, the founder of Landline Games. I believe that is what Haley is talking about. So there you go. You got a bunch of stuff to consider with us. We'd love to have you around. Let's answer one more question. All right. Did you see the last few questions people have been asking? No. That's our last question for the day. No, let me see if I can find one more. When is a skill in your skill set too weak? Interesting question, the slacker named Jack. You've kind of stumped me. It's hard to say. I think maybe this. A skill in your skill set is too weak when it takes up too many of your hours to do that thing. So if, let's say you're an engineer and you're building a game that includes AI, and you got little guys that walk around and they make decisions with a little decision tree. If it takes you 10 days to make that thing barely work, maybe that is an indication that your skill is too weak. My first instinct was to say to you, if you're not confident in that skill. But the thing is, we all have the inner critic who will shout at us and tell us that we suck. So confidence is actually not a great judge of skill. I might say, yeah, if it takes too much time to actually apply that skill, and then maybe secondarily, if you're not able to competently describe that skill. So let's say you were in an interview and you got asked about that skill. If you aren't able to competently say, this is how AI behavior works in my game, and actually describe it to them, maybe that's an indication that it is too weak still. What's the best way to improve one's team building skills? Just do it. Work on teams and get mad at each other and then solve the mad and be less mad. That's how. That's the answer to everything. Just try. Learn by doing. See what happens. Worst that happens is you fail and you've learned something. All right, cool. All right, that's going to be all for today. I'll share the Discord link one more time in case anybody wants to join. And we'd love to see you. Here, I'll pop this in one more time as well. Over in level 1. It's a weekend-long boot camp. It's super fun. It's super awesome. It's actually one of my favorite classes. It gets a 4.8 out of 5 in course report reviews because of just like how much fun we have when we do it every weekend. So we'd love to come and see you there. I think that's going to be it, though. This has been a fantastic chat. I hope everybody has a great time. Like trying their own studios. I hope you actually give it an attempt. If nothing else, building volunteer games is a great thing to be doing right now. If you're a little too worried to jump in and actually try to make money, although honestly, I think you should just actually try to make money. But if that's a little bit too much, you can totally build little volunteer studios and release pretty awesome games that way. And yeah, you can do it. It is a tough time in games, but the best adventures are during the tough times. The good times are kind of boring. So just try to look at this as a really cool fantasy novel and you're the protagonist. Go make games, y'all. All right. Can we share LinkedIn's? Yeah, sure. Before I close it up, why doesn't everybody share their LinkedIn's in the chat? And I'm going to give you homework. I want you to connect with at least 3 people in this room right now on LinkedIn. I'll start. Drop your LinkedIn's, y'all. Connect with at least 3 people. I'll leave it open for like a couple more seconds so everyone can do this. Awesome. Yeah, if it wasn't hard, we wouldn't relish the win. I love that shiny pebble. It's really very true. There's actually something to be said for like inherent value. We tend to think something is worth more simply because we had to work harder for it. That is a true fact again. So yeah, if it wasn't hard, we wouldn't think it was worth it, or at least we would think it's less worth it. So work hard for it. Work-life balance. Be good to yourself. Be kind to yourself. And don't beat yourself up if it doesn't work. It's okay. It's all a journey anyway, man. No matter where you are, no matter how successful you are, you're still going to feel the same way. So get used to it and figure out how to make peace with it. It's all good. All right. I think that's going to do it. I'm going to close down the session. You can still click into the chat if you didn't know that from the event. So you can still network with people. Like I said, connect with at least 3 other people in this room. All right. Goodbye, everybody. I wish you very much luck. Hope to see you around the Discord. And yeah, have a wonderful day. Adios. All right, goodbye, stream. I'm gonna say goodbye now. Adios.